Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, today as Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the Israeli parliament, he created history. He became the first Indian Prime Minister to be given the honor. But this is not the most significant takeaway from PM Modi's two-day trip to Israel. Even before the Prime Minister headed for his second trip to Israel, the red carpet had already been rolled out, from the airport tarmac to the Knesset. Headlines splashed across the Israeli press, called it a landmark moment, a defining phase and a reset that upgrades their ties to a special strategic partnership. Now, the Indian tricolour lined the streets of Jerusalem. The Knesset building was also illuminated in the colours of the Indian tricolour. And that also made its way to the masthead of the Jerusalem Post, a paper that welcomed the Indian Prime Minister with a big, bold namaste, in Hindi no less. And as he addressed the Israel parliament today, the Prime Minister asserted that India and Israel's defense ties will be crucial for regional and global security, and also about how terrorism remains a challenge for both nations to address.
Terrorism aims to destabilize societies, to block development and to erode trust. Countering terrorism requires sustained and coordinated global action, because terror anywhere threatens peace everywhere. No cause can justify the murder of civilians. Nothing can justify terrorism. India has also endured the pain of terrorism for a long time. We remember the 26/11 Mumbai attacks and the innocent lives lost, including Israeli citizens. Like you, we have consistent and uncompromising policy of zero tolerance for terrorism with no double standards.
The sentiment of mutual respect was echoed multiple times and across the spectrum. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also addressed Prime Minister as a friend and highlighted how India stood with Israel.
But I have to tell you, Narendra, my dear friend, I am deeply, deeply moved by your visit here today, because I have to be diplomatic. I will not rank it, because I'll get into trouble. But I've never been more moved than by your visit here with us, a great friend of Israel, a great champion of the Indian-Israeli alliance, and a great leader on the world stage. You didn't flinch, you didn't waver, you didn't give excuses. You stood next to Israel, you stood by Israel, you stood for Israel, you stood for the truth. Thank you, my friend.
Let's take it across to our guest. Joining us is Ashok Sajanar, former diplomat. We have Daniel Boardman, Canadian journalist, joining us. Jeremy Issacharoff is a former Vice Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and former Israel ambassador. Let me start with you first and foremost. Ashok Sajanar, the Prime Minister underlining the importance of terror and the very fact that he referred to it, saying that it aims to destabilize societies, block development, erode trust. And that's why India supports all efforts to durable peace and regional stability. We have a consistent and uncompromising policy of zero tolerance for terror with no double standards. Very, very important. That's perhaps the headline coming out of what the Prime Minister said while addressing the Israel Parliament this evening. Ashok Sajanar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madhav. I quite agree with you. I think this was really the highlight, and this was the first item on the agenda as far as Prime Minister's address is concerned. And I think he spoke with such a great feeling. He spoke with such great emotion, and there was such huge gravitas in what he said. It was very inspiring and thought-provoking, and basically I think the message that went out very clearly and very strongly is that India stands together with Israel as far as the fight against terror is concerned. Madhav, let me make one point here. You see, when the terror attacks took place on the 7th of October, maybe the whole world was with Israel. But slowly and gradually, that support for Israel started coming down as the Israeli response against Hamas and in Gaza. You know, that took time in terms of the violence, in terms of the death, in terms of the destruction that took place. But India has stood steadfast with Israel. I don't think, barring the United States, I can mention any other country that has stood. And that was the point that was made by the Prime Minister today itself, that although, you know, it was in 2023 that it took place, 2.5 years have elapsed. But as far as India is concerned, it continues to stand resolutely, shoulder to shoulder with Israel. And I think this message was very strong. This message was very clear. Whatever might have happened after that, after October 7th, but India continues to be with Israel on this very important subject.
Right, and Prime Minister Netanyahu also, if I can bring in Jeremy Zakharov on that note, also calling Prime Minister Modi a friend of India, someone who he says we've not walked on water, but we have performed miracles in terms of taking the trade and ties between the two countries many-fold over the last several years. I think that's a very, very important way in which Prime Minister Netanyahu has talked about how India, even at this very crucial moment, the very fact that this diplomatic visit is happening, at a time when the Middle East is seeing heightened tensions, just goes to show the kind of ties between India and US and how they've been strengthened over the years.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the Prime Minister's speech, Prime Minister Modi's speech, was an excellent overview of the relationship as a whole and how it goes from many different facets of our bilateral ties, whether in the economic area, innovation, cyber, water, agriculture, and the defense relationship. But it also not only talked about the present dimension of the relations, it also talked a lot about the ancient heritage which both peoples share, the common sense of history. And I think the incredible contribution of both peoples to the world civilization. So I think those, for me, this was a very important overview of the relationship itself. And obviously, as you mentioned before, the statement he made in terms of standing by Israel. And I think that it's absolutely clear, and it should be clear to the Indian people, that Israel also stands behind India. And as Prime Minister Modi said, our relationship is strong. It is a strategic partnership, and our relations also in all of the different areas, but in the area of defense is vital. And I very much agree with that overall assessment.
Right. Let me bring in Daniel Boardman. Daniel Boardman, when I heard those chants of Modi, that were being chanted inside the Israel Parliament, the Knesset, I almost couldn't believe my ears. It's almost like he was inside the Indian Parliament. I wasn't quite sure what I was watching there. Clearly, Prime Minister Modi is a very popular man, even amongst lawmakers there in Israel.
Yeah, I would say Modi's an incredibly popular political figure in Israel and Israeli society. And I mean, my colleagues on the panel, I think, have gotten a lot of things right, identified a lot of key points here. And this is what happens. I think both Modi and Netanyahu understand the other side's society in some way, and I think Israel and India is a very, very natural partnership. We've highlighted defense. I mean, the Israelis do understand that in the global war against terrorism, or Islamic fundamentalist terrorism most specifically, India and Israel are on the front lines, and any sort of victory for the forces of terrorism getting momentum inside India would hype up the global forces as well, and then result in an increased wave of violence inside Israel itself as sort of the natural flow of things. And India also understands this from the reverse, that when there's this global uprise in terrorism and jihadist sentiment, right? You saw this post October 7th, these terrorist groups get excited, and you saw Pakistan and their terrorist proxies act out in Pahalgam and sort of try and instigate the same thing. So there's this full-on understanding, and I think there's a lot of incentives from both sides to see the other side succeed,
Right.
and especially in defense, because Israel wants to set the precedent that, hey, it has really, really good technology, really high-grade stuff. And if you're a friend of Israel, you can have it. And if you're one of these countries hectoring Israel, one of these European countries that is spending its time just bashing Israel to appeal to its own set of imported radicals, then you're not going to get the stuff. But if you do have an actual problem on your border, like Pakistani-backed terrorist groups throwing missiles at you, the Israelis can help. And this benefits both sides. So I think the Indians also want to show that if you're an unreserved friend of India, if you say Pakistan is crazy, we're with India, and the benefits that could bring to your society, we're cooperating with this market of billions of people that have these different sectors that are burgeoning.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting that you mentioned the two things, that are very high on India's priority, or at least on the minds of Indians at this point of time. One is, of course, the fact that there's a possibility of technology transfer and defense manufacturing between India and Israel. But more importantly, and let me bring in Ashok Sajana, at a time where Pakistan is, coming out to make all sorts of statements as far as this visit is concerned, the announcement from Israel's side, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has proposed this hexagon of alliances, including India and several countries in the Middle East and Asia, Africa, so on and so forth. What are we to make of this new alliance and how that's going to function, and how that will be a paradigm, in terms of counterweighting Pakistan and, various countries who were announced their alliance and their partnership with Pakistan?
Yeah, thank you, Madhav, for that question. Very little is really known about that hexagonal alliance. It was just put out by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the 22nd. So that's just about 3-4 days ago. The exact contours of this alliance, this proposal, are yet to be debated, yet to be known, yet to find out, because, basically what it means is India, Israel coming together, also some Mediterranean powers like Cyprus and Greece, both of them are against Turkey. They have hostile relationship, inimical relationship with Turkey. Both Israel and India have their own problems with Turkey. But which are the countries which are other countries from the Mediterranean, other countries which are there from the Middle East, from West Asia, from Africa, even the mention of Southeast Asia has been. So, one is in terms of the composition. Second is in terms of objectives. Meaning if it is what has been mentioned that the Sunni axis and the Shia axis, I can understand what Benjamin Netanyahu has in mind. When he says Shia axis, it's against the Houthis, it's against Hezbollah. When he says Sunni axis, it is about Hamas, and, for us, it would be Pakistan. But, we cannot have a comprehensive, when you mention without any distinction, just a Sunni axis, does it include all the countries? We have to be very mindful of that, right? Because of a variety of reasons, as far as India is concerned, we have 9 million people there. We have such excellent them. And under the Abraham Accord, even Israel has relations with the UAE. There is the I2U2, there is the IMEC, etc. So I think Israel is also mindful of reaching out and having good relations, particularly Saudi Arabia. So I think we need more work, more information on that before we can take a position on that.
Right, and the kind of welcome that we've seen today, and let me bring in on that note Daniel Boardman. Daniel Boardman, we saw the Shalom Namaste that was there in the Jerusalem Post, but India's recent reiteration of its support for a sovereign Palestine state based on the 67 borders and its calibrated observer role when it comes to the Gaza Peace Initiative. Will this really test the balance of ties that India has between Palestine as well as India and Israel? How do you see all of that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things that is sort of the fly in the ointment. So when you say two-state solution based on the 67 borders, the 67 borders are not sustainable because they led to the 67 war. And the 67 borders that would mean what? That the West Bank would go back to Jordan and then Gaza would be back under Egyptian control. So the whole sentiment is nonsensical. And the serious Indians know this and serious Israelis know this. It's just something that diplomats have to say out loud in Western countries, that we believe in a two-state solution to just like move the conversation along. And I think what makes India so dynamic in its partnership is it can kind of just like say sort of the diplomatic prayer, like, we believe in a Palestinian state, whatever. The fact of the matter is there's no Palestinian faction that believes in a Palestinian state on 67 borders. So it's a completely moot point. It's just a thing that we say. And I think Israel and India are kind of wink, wink, just moving in reality. And if there ever is a Palestinian faction that wants a Palestinian state, then we can talk about Palestinian nationalism. But so far, no such thing exists. So, like if the Palestinians ever get some sort of governance that wants to govern, then great. We'll
Let me
talk
bring
about
in
it.
Jeremy on one of the important points. Jeremy, the very fact that the Prime Minister has addressed the Israeli Knesset, that's of course not something that all visiting heads of government, heads of state get in terms of an honor. But the very fact that it comes at this very crucial time, looks at the importance of the relationship. But where do we go from here? How do we further build on it? And how much of this Hexagon alliance will play a role in that?
Look, first of all, I think in terms of the Hexagon alliance, I think first of all we should concentrate on the bilateral alliance and develop it and strengthen it, and have a very deep and ongoing conversation between our governments and our security establishments and our intelligence establishments, how we can further cooperate and how we can contribute each to the other's national security. And then try and build on it and see. I don't know, Hexagon is a six-sided polygon. It's I don't know if this is an alliance with 6 partners or more or less, but I think first and foremost, the main driver would be the Israeli-Indian dimension. I'd second of all say it's not just important just to have a partnership in the security area, but I think we should also pursue the IMEC idea in a very resilient way. And I must say, I'd like to just comment on the last thing the previous speaker said. Israel has just gone through 2.5 years of war. And I firmly believe that it is important, whether it's a two-state solution, whatever lines are drawn, we need to have an Israeli-Palestinian political agreement. I think this will bolster and strengthen our ties, not only with our neighbors like Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia, but it will also serve India's interests as well. So I don't know about borders and 67 or not, but I definitely think that we cannot come out of this whole period of suffering without some political solution on the Israeli-Palestinian.
Will there be a solution? What's the roadmap ahead? Many, many such questions that really are staring us in the face at this point of time. But I'd like to thank all our panelists, Ashok Sajanhar, Daniel Boardman, as well as Jeremy Issacharoff. Thanks so much for joining us and breaking this down for our viewers.